we're trying to be very careful with the work, because the more things he does, the more people are gonna expect that job is, and we wanna make sure that it's very pointed in the directions that we want it to go. So, sorry to interrupt.
No problem at all. And then finally, these are just some future areas of focus to expect that I also share with the staff as I go around to the faculty meetings. Parent engagement, and then Dr. Nally has sat down with me and we talked about the importance of that. Making sure our families are engaged and have information. That definitely will continue to be a focus. Partnerships with other community organizations in addition to Rutgers, student and family transitions. We're very proud of our freshman seminar, but we also know that we have other transitions that are just as important as well. So our transitions between third and fourth and fifth to sixth will also be a focus as we move forward. District-wide training, and that's something that some districts just jump right in so fast. And we're taking a very calculated approach about what type of training will be best for our district. Just because a neighboring district or another district in New Jersey across the country is doing something doesn't mean it's right for the scattering. And so we're taking this year to really determine when we have a training for our staff. It's going to be what we need as a district, what's important for us, and what's relevant to our students, our staff, and our families.
You know, talking about transitions, we were also able to carve out a counselor position at the high school who's solely devoted to making the leap from 12th grade to the next step. College counselor without a load of kids, so really can do para presentations, meet with kids, be available for people to understand more of the college applications, the FAFSA reports that they have to fill out to get the federal funding, which are incredibly amazing. 30% of our parents probably didn't go to school here, right? So they don't know the process of the system. So with Alex's work, with Noel's work, with Dawn's work, with now Kelly Chalakos, who's the counselor at the high school, who's solely for the transition of 12th graders to the next level. Which I know we've discussed at this level, right, at the board, that was maybe a deficiency that we had. So she's been at that job since the beginning of September, doing a fantastic job. And our hope is that we're covering as many bases as we can. So again, sorry to interrupt, Alex.
I literally was in a meeting earlier this week with Kelly, among others, talking about some of the work that she's doing and we can do together. And finally, in addition to the research and data I'm looking at the high school, we will continue to look at data across all of our schools, from pre-K to 12. I close my presentations with the faculties with this, just to help them understand. These are two things that I truly believe in, that as educators, DEI is already in our DNA. And I reinforce that, like Dr. Nelly said, to drive home that this is not a program, this is not an initiative, this is already embedded in who we are as educators, all right? And finally, when we do this work, all too often, people feel that to provide equity, we have to compromise excellence, and that we're watering down curriculum, or watering down programs, or watering down opportunities, and that's far from the truth. As we endeavor to increase our equity efforts in our district, we will not compromise excellence. And I stand behind that, and I close with that to make sure that that is a clear message that our entire staff will receive as I go around to each school. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Anyone with any questions, comments?
Dr. Gray?
Yes, ma'am.
Just from your preliminary touring of the schools and speaking, what's one of the chief concerns, or just an overarching thread that you've identified, something that needs to be honed in on from a DEI standpoint?
Yeah, and I want to be careful, and I try to be careful as I field questions like this to make sure that our staff, our administrators, our district, our board understands that, these are things that we're going to strengthen. It's not things that have just fallen by the wayside, but as we all grow, we can enhance things. And so what I feel that we can enhance and continue to work on is our communication with families and helping make sure that families understand and have access.
Yes.
Some families are always checking websites, always looking at the Board of Ed minutes, always emailing teachers, some are not. And so we have to make sure that for those that may not be, how can we reach out to them to give them that information. And not just say, oh, they should have checked the website, oh, they should have checked the email that was sent. We can continue to extend ourselves because we all benefit. When our families have information and they can do the best for their child and help their child grow and access opportunities, we all benefit as a district.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, Dr. Gray, again, congratulations. You were born for it. It's definitely in your DNA. One of the things you talked about is common language, moving in the right direction. But you also mentioned you're going to stress what DEI is not. What is it not?
It's not just a black and white issue. And all too often, and when I talk about diversity, I often talk about the question we have when we interview candidates about, Scatterway is a diverse district. Probably all of us in here had that question when we interview. Tell us about your experience with diversity. And all too often we hear someone say, oh, I worked in Newark, with all black and Hispanic students, I understand diversity. Well, you understand black and Hispanic students. That's not synonymous with diversity. Diversity is what Piscataway is, a blending of various ethnic backgrounds. It's like, various socioeconomic backgrounds, various life experiences, various countries or places of origin. That's what diversity is. Diversity is not black or urban or poor.
And also, Alex and I speak a lot about this when we meet.
Mm-hmm.
Diversity is just a fact,
Mm-hmm.
right? How we deal with it is our character, is who we are, and it's who our strength is, right? Just because we have, certain percent of black students and Hispanic students and white students, it's just a fact. Doesn't make us good or bad, right? If we deal with it poorly, it makes us bad. If we deal with it the right way and really lift everybody up and reach everybody, that's our character, and that's what we're striving for.
Yeah. We all too often limit it to race. And this work is about race and ethnicity, but it's also about gender. It's about socioeconomic status. It's about our life experience. It's about LGBTQ. It's about where we come from, how we were raised. It's about so many different things and opportunities for so many different people, and not just from a deficit perspective. We often look at it as a negative and a deficit. But it's also equity is helping students advance that need to advance. As well, and making sure everyone has opportunities, those that are struggling, but also those that need even more opportunities to advance and to grow and to thrive. That's what this work is about also.
And lastly, you mentioned we're not going to subjugate ourselves and compromise excellence. I think that's a tremendous point. But one of the things we talked about, and over the years we always talk about, equity doesn't mean equal. It's giving people what they need at the time that they need it. So one of the problems we have in Piscataway, we're always talking about those who are not college-bound learners. Will DEI address those issues?
Yes, definitely. And when I talk about equity, when I define equity, I'm careful to also highlight the importance of equality as well. And sometimes we think that when we are achieving equity, it means that we're getting rid of equality. No. There are things that need to be equal. And there's equality that will continue. So we need to have equality as well as equity. We're not getting rid of, equality for the sake of equity. And so both of those still go hand in hand. All right? But when we talk about equity and we talk about pushing our students for college and being college bound, it's also understanding that all of our students may not be college bound. But we want to make sure that we're giving our all to our students so that they can make those decisions. That we're not cutting them out of opportunities because we don't have faith in them or we don't think certain students can achieve. It's giving our students the best we can give them so that if they want to go to college, they can. But if they want to go to the military, they can. If they want to go right to the workplace, they can. But we're not preventing them from achieving whatever their goal is.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. We appreciate it. I just want to say, when Dr. Ranelli brought the idea to us about your position, we were, let's hear more, and he explained it. But I can tell you that everybody on this board supported you, and we still support you even more now that we've heard from you. I think this is just so wonderful, the area that you're going into and how you're bringing it all together. So I just thank you you for the role that you've taken over now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thompson. I miss it again. I miss students and families, but I'm also excited about this new opportunity. So thank you.
I asked
so much.
Alex the other day what he misses about the building, just yesterday, and your answer?
To the students, staff, the families.
Yeah. But what'd you say after that?
I'm excited about
Getting to see the other kids
and
and-
to see kids at all levels now, so I'm excited about that as well.
Yeah, a lot of the kids he had are in high school now, and it's just great to see how they've evolved, or, you know, maybe not, but he's a friendly face that they can help out and direct it. I said, we're extremely lucky to have him, but he's also lucky because it's a really great role for him.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions before we? Thank you. Ken.
Dr. Gray, I'm gonna direct to leave. He is heading up to Rhode Island tomorrow morning to see his son at college parent weekend. So he's not just ducking out on us, I'm telling him he's gotta go.
Be safe.
Safe
Thank you.
travel.
Thank you.
All right, see you, thank you,
Gotta go see my
Dr. Gray.
boy.
Yep, gotta go see your baby boy, yep. So, okay, the last part, but not least, right? First wanna start off by thanking David Oliveira for responsible, award-winning work in the business office and his department. It's very rare that a district is debt-free, quote unquote, but that's exactly the position that we'll be in very soon. It's a great opportunity for us to infuse some much-needed building safety, building upgrades and repairs without any increase to our taxpayers. So I will turn it over to David, let him take it over also with his guests, and we'll move forward from there.
Great, thank you, Dr. Ranelli. And before I let our architect Spiesel get started with the presentation, just provide a little background on how we got to kind of where we are now. You know, the district has been very lucky in the period I shouldn't say lucky, it's hard work, right, from the board and the staff, to get a lot of capital projects done over the years. Every year we take a look at what we can do based on our budget, based on our capital reserve, and we're constantly assessing capital projects. But a couple of years ago, you know, as Dr. Ranelli mentioned, we've been aware of this looming situation where debt will be coming off the books. So a couple of years ago, I said, well, we should really do more of a multi-year assessment of capital projects, and we came up with a 5-year capital project plan. And the way we did that was starting in 2019, Dr. Ranelli and I walked every building with each principal, trying to identify, you know, things that we felt the buildings needed, okay? And that was step one. I went to every building, I visited subsequent to that, and we had meetings in every single building, and we had a diverse group of staff from the building that met with myself to share their kind of feedback and input on the buildings, kind of what is important to them. These meetings had anywhere, you know, usually there were between 6 to 12 staff members present at the meeting. You know, some of these folks live in district, they're parents of Piscataway, teachers, custodians, the building principal, etc. And from that, created a 5-year capital project plan that kind of summarized those things that we found and said, what are the targets that we have to try and complete some of these projects? And that 5-year capital project plan was presented to the Fiscal Planning and Operations Committee in 2020, of which we have, you know, a couple of board members and a few members of the public, one of whom's here, one of whom's a former board member, and we discussed this long-term capital project plan and kind of came up with some compartments of where we think we can get this work done. One area that some of the items are falling under is the ESIP, which I know the board is aware of. We've talked about that ESIP project is ongoing. We'll be doing a lot of HVAC replacements primarily as part of the ESIP. And there were other ones that were really kind of slotted and said, listen, if the district can do a referendum and if the taxpayers were to approve it, you know, these are some projects that we think we should focus on in that referendum. That capital project plan was shared with the full board last year as well. And from there, the capital project plan during the 2021 school year, despite COVID, we engaged Spiesel to do some independent building assessments. They walked the buildings. Spiesel is our architects. And they kind of came up with their own observations. And we subsequently had a meeting with administrators in the district, again, to factor in the 5-year capital project plan to talk about what Spiesel had found. And from that is, you know, what you'll see tonight. It highlights the areas that we think would best serve the district with improvements. A lot of it focused on safety and security, building envelope issues, which really our staff and the architects are well positioned to provide insight on, and a lot of instructional needs, classroom needs that you'll see during the presentation. The draft presentation was reviewed again with the Fiscal Planning and Operations Committee last month in September. And we went through that with them, again with the members of the public that are on that committee present. The estimated project currently is estimated at $81.6 million. And that project would be financed by a referendum were we to continue down this path, and if the voters were to approve it. We have debt that is being retired in the 22-23 school year. So at the end of that school year, and for those of you that come to our meeting in January or February when the auditors are here, they've highlighted each time that it's very rare for a district to be in a position we are approaching, which is 100% debt-free. At the end of that 22-23 school year, we'll be 100% debt-free if we were not to, add any debt. So doing this, considering this referendum, again, if it's successful, we are looking to go out for a bond that would, in essence, replace the debt that we currently have, replace those debt payments with new debt payments, and our projection and our target is that it will have no additional tax impact on the taxpayers. So the amount of debt service tax payment that the taxpayers make in 22-23, we'll make a similar, perhaps slightly less payment in 23-24, and we will be able to effectuate $80 million plus of projects. So tonight's presentation will give you a background on what we're considering. If the board is supportive of us continuing this process, a formal approval of the submission of schematic plans for these projects to the Department of Education would be the next step. There's a resolution on tonight's agenda where that is the next step. We're not doing approval of a resolution to set a referendum date. The next step in the process is to submit the plans to the DOE because they take traditionally months to review them. So we would need to know if they're approved before we can take those next steps. Our targeted referendum vote date is September 27th of 2022. So about a year away. And again, if this continues, and if the vote is successful, we really look forward to continued involvement. We've had numerous discussions about having students involved in the design development phase, which is really kind of the nuts and bolts of, what are some of these projects going to look like? And when we start the presentation, you'll see a few of the spaces we're talking about. So with that background, I'm going to turn it over to Justin Kozik and Natalia Wilk. They're with Spiesel Architectural Group, our architects. We have a presentation for the board. We're going to hand out new hard copies for the board, and of course it'll be up here on the screen as well.
Good evening, everyone. Like David said, my name is Justin Kozik. I'm a senior project architect with Spiesel. It's Natalia Wilk. She's an architectural designer. And Natalia and I have kind of been involved with this process almost for a year now. We started this back in the winter of 2020, or 2021. So a lot of effort has gone into getting us to this point, and there is even more effort coming forward to kind of make this a reality. Some exciting stuff. Kind of briefly, kind of reiterate what David said. Our first step in this process was to perform a facilities assessment of the entire district. So we visited every single building, went into every single room, including the mechanical rooms that very few people, and even in the district, have probably been into. and evaluated the buildings in all these different categories that you see here. So one of the, obviously there's the easy stuff, flooring, ceiling, what's the condition of the physical space, but we also looked at it in terms of educational needs. Even though the space itself, the finishes and the physical space itself might be in good shape or good condition, is it actually meeting the current needs of the student body? And is it able to be, possibly converted into a more 21st century learning experience? We also did look at building systems, building envelope, and the site of every building as well as part of that process. Through all of those surveys and all of that work, we kind of developed a priority list of everything that we found. So priority one, which is what we'll be focusing on when we talk about the referendum, they address the highest priority needs. These included the educational program needs, health, safety, and security, potential code problems and code issues, and also projects currently in planning that the district had mentioned previously that they were looking to do. Priority two, those were kind of lower priority program needs. So there are plenty of spaces that we saw the potential for program, but only the highest level ones kind of made it into the final referendum scope. Comfort and long-term district needs. So these are things that are still on the docket, still probably should be done at some point, but will be addressed possibly in another means at another time. And then finally, low priority items, which these are kind of nice to have. They address aesthetics and issues that really affect only the aesthetics of the spaces. So as David mentioned, priority one items totaled $81.6 million. Obviously, the biggest heavy hitter of all of them was the high school, just based on the sheer size of it and the complexity of the building, followed by the middle schools and then the elementary schools. But overall, we looked at the total scope of everything we looked at. It was over $200 million worth of potential work. And the amazing thing is that the district has done a fantastic job of knocking away all of these other, other needs such as HVAC, Dave mentioned with the ESIP, LED lighting, which is also currently underway in the ESIP, and a PPA solar project. We also had the opportunity to knock out some more RTU and unit ventilator replacements as part of the ESSER 2 and ESSER federal funding that came available. There are other capital reserve projects that are kind of currently in motion. We currently at $10.5 million approximately in capital reserve, and that will be there'll be additional funds added after the June audit. And then, of course, that kind of brings you back to the referendum, which is all of our priority one items. So, what will the referendum fund? Of the $81.6 million, a little more than half of it is going directly to address educational program needs. The major priority project we saw throughout the district, and this could be felt at every single level and every single building, was media centers. A lot of the media centers in the district still are treated more like a traditional library. They have some 21st century kind of learning components, but there's a lot of potential there. They are great shell spaces, and we'll show some images of some projects we've done recently. Similar type spaces that really have brought these spaces to the next level. Science labs. The high school, I'm not sure how many science labs are in the high school, but there's quite a few. And especially in the Susan B. Anthony wing, they are in dire need of renovation. They are original to the 1970 construction. They're quite frankly actually well kept for their age, but they are kind of past their useful life. We also are trying to incorporate, this kind of goes into the media centers a little bit, STEM and STEAM labs. We're kind of focusing that more on the middle school level, as well as some other specialty lab spaces, wood shops, graphic arts labs, and some other specialty spaces, and they're mostly exclusive to the high school. So these are some images of the media centers throughout the buildings. Like I said, generally speaking, they are in fine condition, well kept, well maintained. But these are very much traditional library spaces. And one of the things that we as Spiesel have looked to do is really targeted media centers as a potential for becoming active and vibrant learning environments. The next slide. So this is actually a media center that we just renovated this past year. This space actually was very similar to the high school media center that is there today, and this shows the potential for creating a very vibrant learning space out of these kind of traditional shells. There is flexible furniture, there is technology integration, there is actually, not shown in this image quite well, but at the very back of the space we actually integrated a cafe into the media center space. As a matter of fact, this space has become so popular with the students that they actually have a waiting list to get in the space. So not only is it a great space they've actually been able to use for public board meetings and things of that sort, but it also is a space that students want to go to. It's a space they want to visit. It's a space they want to collaborate and really grow as students. This is another example at a smaller level. So this is an elementary school in Hazlitt, where we did a very similar type of project. We had a couple of classrooms grouped together. They didn't have a traditional media center in the school. So we actually kind of blew out the wall between two classrooms and integrated a lot of the same technology. So it doesn't have to be on such a grandiose scale. This type of integration of technology and flexible furniture can happen at all levels. And that was one of the things that we definitely focused on in our facility assessment. And as part of this plan, every single media center at every school in the district will be brought up to this standard. Science labs. So I mentioned the Susan B. Anthony High School science labs, and these are them. As you can see, they're very dark. They have casework that is 60, 70 years old, and they are, although well maintained, well past their useful life. Additionally, once again, traditional science labs in schools are inflexible. They have kind of utilities just built into the center of the spaces, and it does not allow for any variation in educational changes as time goes by. So one of the things that we've been doing recently is actually been shifting the utilities to the outside walls and putting in flexible furniture into these spaces. So they can be set up more like a traditional classroom, or they can be shifted over to the side of the wall and be used as a lab environment. So this, for example, is a middle school level. So right now we're looking at science lab renovations in all the middle schools as well as the high school. But of course, there is always the opportunity to kind of just go back and do a major renovation and keep a little bit more traditional layout, depending on the district needs. And we haven't really gotten into that finite level of detail yet. But there's the opportunity to kind of make those changes and kind of grow the space with the curriculum. Shop spaces. So this was one of the major things that we found at particularly the high school level. Many of the shop spaces, wood shop, graphic arts labs, I can't remember if there are any other major ones. Those are the three major spaces that we were looking at as part of this scope. But all of them were in dire need of renovation. So once again, flexibility is key. Opening up the space is key. Creating a more active and vibrant learning environment. And the great thing about this is the shell of the space remains the same. It's just kind of a lot of times just a integration of furniture and technology can turn an outdated space into a vibrant space where students want to come and go to class. What we found is with these kind of wood shop scheme lab renovations, that it actually increases interest in these programs and definitely helps with the STEM engineering, education of the school district. Okay. One other thing that we're going to fund is just general building interiors projects. One of the things throughout the district that was noted as priority were the ceilings throughout the spaces. Now, one of the things that is being tackled through the ESA is a LED lighting conversion, which is definitely going to help the definitely the quality of the space. But oftentimes when you put in new LED lighting, it really shows how old the ceilings are and how much they're due for replacement. Many of the ceilings are original to the buildings. This primarily is focused on the corridors, because many of the elementary school and middle school classrooms actually don't have a ceiling. They have just an exposed wood deck, which is, if this ceiling wasn't here, that's what you'd see above here. This is actually a very similar construction to what we see in the middle and elementary schools. One of the other items that we identified, and this is a major piece of discussion in schools over the past 5 years, and that's door hardware security upgrades. So what we've, in a few school districts, and it's been very, very successful, we have retrofit electronic hardware onto all the existing classroom doors of the school. The advantage of this is it allows for a single button lockdown of every single corridor door in the entire building from one location or multiple locations throughout the building. This is a major advantage and advancement compared to where most door hardware was 5 years ago, which requires someone to manually go up and close the door. In some cases, having to open the door and slide some sort of device down to lock the door down. So this is a major advancement, and unfortunately, in the world we live today, it's become more of a necessity than anything else. But it's something that's been very successful. We've done this in a number of school districts in the area, including Denellen. And then finally, toilet room renovations. We kind of started the first phase of this, must have been 6-7 years ago now, at the high school. Almost all of the toilet rooms throughout the district have not been upgraded since they were installed. Many of them are non-ADA compliant or have been retrofitted to the best of their ability to provide some level of ADA compliance. So this is a kind of a multi-factor piece. It's not just improving the aesthetics, but also bringing them up to full ADA compliance. So just a couple examples of some of the ceilings ceiling conditions we found throughout the space. Many of them are stained. Many of the grid itself is either rusting or warped, and they are just in due for replacement. So this is an example of a ceiling lighting replacement we did at a building at a high school in Keyport. 1950s building, so you can see the difference in just lighting and quality going from replacing ceiling and lighting from one image to the next. It really does brighten up a building, and interior health is one of the focuses of what we've tried to do with